Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and DarkDryDrew here. Today is Thursday, January the 24th, 2019. It's 4 p.m. in New York, 1 p.m. in Los Angeles, 9 p.m. in London, and Sydney, Australia is at 8 a.m. Wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us for yet another episode of LOA Today, your daily dose of happy. The only unhappy thing is Steve Rowell had to beg out at the last second from joining us on the podcast today. So it's going to be Drew and I as we normally are. But next week will be a trio. So that'll be the time we'll be able to get into that, which will be good. And I hear the phone ringing. I guess people are ready to connect in here.
Yeah.
How you doing, Drew? We haven't talked in a couple weeks. How you doing?
I've been doing well. I've been getting my life organized. I kind of lived my entire life up until now pretending I was organized, and now kind of fully aligning everything.
Okay. Well, progress is good. That's a very good thing.
Purging. Yeah. Deep purging the old Drew.
Deep purging the old Drew. Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds serious.
Yeah.
I take it it's a good thing. I mean, the way you're saying that, it doesn't sound like it's bad, so.
It's just, it's an interesting process, like going from a caterpillar to a butterfly, you know? You have to recognize that you're a caterpillar before you can become a butterfly.
I always wondered about that.
You can't just keep, you know.
I mean, do the caterpillars actually know that they're caterpillars that are about to become butterflies? Do they actually know that? I've often wondered that.
You'd have to ask one of them. I'm not qualified to answer that.
Well, since we don't have any caterpillars in the studio right here, we'll have to bypass that one. But anyway, people checking in to the live stream. So hello to everyone who's checking in. It's good to see you. As I said, Steve's had to beg out this week because he had a truly last minute engagement come up. So we will be inviting him back next week. But that gives us more of an opportunity to see what we can do to help our friend DarkDryDrew, who is recently graduated from college and trying to figure out life and gaining some benefit from our conversations. So I'm going to start with, where are you now? I mean, 2 weeks ago, we actually were talking a couple weeks ago about the organizing thing, and I was suggesting that you just go after life and so forth. Well, apparently you got the organizing thing fixed. So where are you at now?
Yeah, I go back and forth between my parents' houses because I like to see. When I was a kid, it was split custody, and now it's like the flip flop. Is I just visit each parent.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, in California, like I don't want to pay $800 to $1,400 a month for a room when I could just hop back and forth and do what I was planning on doing anyway, which is, I guess, kind of just getting closer to my family. So that's kind of been a big focal point, and got some work stuff squared away. So like everything's falling into place finally. But there's always something new to learn, I suppose you could say. And so that's where lately it was like, okay, I have new goals essentially. So how can I better align my room and my life and my habits? I've been focusing like more on habits instead of goals.
Mm-hmm.
One habit, for instance, that's so simple, but it really takes a lot of effort, is putting things back where they belong.
Yeah.
And that was something that I sucked at my entire life up until recently, and now it's like, no matter what, like I have to put it back where it belongs.
Uh-huh.
And just that was like pretty monumental and sort of building that like, I guess the willpower and the determination to do something. Because even though it's like, oh, I need to go put this fork into the wash, and I need to like put these pants back on the shelf, and like all that kind of stuff, it sort of has been translating over to other areas, which is something that I didn't initially expect, if that makes sense.
Okay. And you said that stuff had been kind of falling into place. For most people, that would be a pretty happy time, because it feels like, oh, wow, everything's going my way right now. Has that been your experience?
I kind of like literally just finished doing all the building up to that stuff yesterday, so I feel like today is the first day where it's like, hey, I can just have fun now. Like last night, I started working on my screenplay some more. I'm working on, because one of the things you mentioned was to feel it out, not figure it out, and so I've been working on that.
Good.
And just kind of seeing, like, not planning so much, but trying to just do exactly what I feel like doing at that time.
And how's that worked?
I mean, I'm getting the hang of it more, getting more in touch with, like, how I feel, and then trying to understand that, because that's something that I've never been good at, is, like, reading my own body. Even, like, I forget to eat, I forget to drink, sometimes I forget to breathe, like, so caught up in, like, complex things in my head that I forget, like, the basics of remaining alive, So trying to get all that on track and get my health stuff. Like I've been eating at consistent times and going to bed at consistent times. Like just that alone makes a huge difference, especially with my stomach problems and stuff. So yeah, it's kind of like the cumulative efforts of months and months and months of figuring things out. It's falling into place. It's not, it's not a whole new system yet. It's sort of
so how does that feel?
I
mean, the fact that it's falling into place and that it's just all one thing after another, just kind of a cascade. How does that feel to you?
It's feeling more relaxing. Not like immediately. It wasn't like an immediate like, wow, thank God that's all over.
Right.
Like when I would finish like finals in college, something it was like, oh, that's all over. Like, but this is different. This is sort of like more subtle. Like it's sort of just like just sitting here on my bed right now, looking around my room, being like, wow, this is totally aligned for what I want to be doing the next year. And so that's like an exciting feeling. It's sort of like things to look forward to.
Very good.
Like just an appreciation. So.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah. In fact, we've got some members of the live stream audience who are sending along their congratulations as well. Jeffrey was saying that, well, first of all, Jeffrey wanted to point out we're all learning to be responsible adults, which is true. I think that's kind of like an ongoing thing we all go through. And then Sarah said, you sound so much more positive in your voice, talking to you, Drew, your tone when talking, and that she wants to let you know that she's sending you healing and positive vibes. So people are hearing it. They're hearing your voice. That. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, it's been a journey. I'm sure even I listened to my comedy album, which was in June, and it was a little bit sad because you could like hear it in my voice that I was still in a dark place. Like, despite the album still going how I planned it to, but just in my voice, sort of the vibe that came with that was like this place of sorrow, and a lot of that I've gotten past. So, yeah, I appreciate that.
Well, you got to be careful, because if you continue on this path, you're going to have to change your nickname. I mean,
I know
it won't be DarkDryDrew. You'll have to be like like LightDryDrew or something like that. It won't be dark anymore.
It has occurred to me that I'm like, wow, what happens if it's sort of, the name has always been kind of tongue in cheek in that regard, in that I do sort of have these, like this really dark brooding side and then this sort of like hyper optimistic side. And like they work together, but not always, And it's kind of like the good devil and the angel, or what is the angel and the devil or whatever
on the shoulder,
on each shoulder,
right.
Or like that.
Yeah,
movie that was from, but kind of like that, except it's in my head.
Right.
And so sort of the constant struggle of each side.
Well, it sounds like
DarkDryDrew things.
It sounds like the devil's side has kind of gotten muzzled a little bit. Like he's not talking anymore. The angel's doing all the talking.
I'd have to. I'm not sure yet. That's a really interesting thing to think about.
What makes you not sure?
I'd say I haven't, because I was talking to my mom about this. So some people because I run dialogue in my head, So each of those moods has their unique voice in my head. And it's not like, like I hear voices when I'm walking around. Like it's not a schizophrenic kind of thing or something like that. It's different from that. It's like an internal voices. And some people apparently don't have that, which I thought was really strange because that's sort of how I've always been able to think about things and to process things with visual images and then these different like versions of myself talking. And at least lately it's been calmed down more. It seems like maybe that all of the sides have kind of joined forces rather than being kind of at ends, like
Sure.
that they're sort of on the same track now. Like, okay, we all get it,
Well, that's kind of similar to what I experienced from doing mirror exercises, where you talk in the mirror and praise yourself and give yourself all kinds of positive input and so forth. After about my first 30 days of doing that, not only had those negative dialogues gone away, but my head had actually gone silent inside. It was nice. It was pleasant, a nice pleasant change, but it was also a little bit weird because, wow, everything's quiet all of a sudden.
Yeah, I have been doing the mirror exercises.
Oh, you have?
Consider that might have been,
How long have you been doing them now?
Oh gosh, probably since November, but not every day. So
Okay.
I'm trying. I wanted to get my rooms organized, and then now it's like my goal is to have like a 30-day plan. So like a workout plan, meditation plan, yoga plan, all of that to try and get some sort of to find a way to like fit it into my routine. And the mirror exercises have been part of that.
Very good.
Yeah, I enjoyed them. Once you get over the whole like, I guess the awkward intro where you're like, I am talking to my face in the mirror. This is so strange and foreign to me.
Isn't it?
It's like, well, only because you haven't done it before. Like,
right. Yeah. Exactly. Did you find that, I know this is what I found, and others have found this, but I wonder if you found it too. Did you find after, say, 3 or 4 or 5 days, the strangeness wasn't nearly there the way it was the first couple days?
Yes, although I still haven't gotten to the point where like if someone walked into my room and they're like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah,
I'd actually kind of be like, just because I feel like I exhibit enough other signs that people might be concerned about me that like that one would just, they're like, "Drew, what are you doing? You spend almost all your time alone, and now you're talking to yourself in the mirror. Like, what has happened?" Yeah.
Yep.
So that's the one, but that's why lately I've been telling my family, like, just very, like, I was like, Mom, I'm going to be writing the screenplay for the next, I don't know, until it's done, and, like, I need to be locked away. It's a very emotional process, and so if you were to just barge in and I'm in a frenzied state, you have to understand that I'm just feeling what the film is in that moment. It's just being honest about it. I guess I'll have to tell them about the mirror exercises too. Like, hey, look, sometimes I talk to the mirror. It answers my questions.
Do you find that you get answers talking to the mirror?
Yeah, kind of.
That would be new for me.
More when it's all dark in the room.
Oh, okay.
The mirror seems to bring like a sense of, I wouldn't even call it comfort, but more just the sense of like, of calm.
Right.
Sort of levels everything out. It's not even necessarily like although I will say it could be and I'd recommend this to other people, like a good confidence boost.
Yes.
If you're like, I don't know, if you're about to go on a date or a job interview or even just,
right.
I mean, for me, just like talking to other people has always been kind of intimidating, like at first. I spend so much time alone that when I go outside, I'm like, oh gosh, I have to remember how to use my voice and how to not be all dark and brooding and don't talk like this and just and like mumble and stuff. So yeah, the mirror exercises will just be like, look in the mirror, say a few positive affirmations, and
it's amazing.
It's like
I mean,
a good boost.
Yeah, it's one of those things. When I'm sure when you first started, you probably just went with it for the first couple of days because I said to do it. And then after some period of time, I don't know what the period of time was because it's different for everybody, For me, it was about 20 days. After some period of time, you started to notice some kind of a difference, which you may or may not have associated with the mirror exercise, but you felt something had shifted.
Yes. Yeah, and that's one of those things where it's like you can't definitively say it's the mirror, especially because I've been doing so many other things.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I realized was sort of like, I could describe it as it's not about being positive, it's about being a positive being, and sort of aligning all of these things. So like when I was just doing meditation, like, of course it didn't work, it didn't solve all my problems, like nothing is going to solve every problem.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I was, not eating processed foods and doing meditation and doing like a little bit of stretching and, brushing my teeth twice a day instead of once and like all of these things, then it started to add up. And so I think the mirror exercises that fit in all of that, where it's definitely like something that you feel better after you do it. That's kind of a good benchmark. Like, been drinking kombucha lately that I've made and Voss. And it's one of, like, even though they're so odd to me, having grown up on just, like, the American diet, it feels better after consuming it. So that was, like, the sign where I'm like, whoa, I don't feel dead afterwards. Let's be on the right track.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's good. That's good stuff. Hey, we got a question for you and a comment. First, the comment. Sarah was saying that when your mind is silent and you're in the power of now, it's the best place to be to appreciate that moment. She says, I wish I could stay focused and remain in the now for longer periods, but I'm grateful to experience a little bit of it. Practice makes perfect, I suppose, which probably sounds pretty familiar to you after doing the mirror exercises for a while now.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, especially that staying in the now thing's a challenge for me, too.
Yeah.
I'm in my head a lot, or like I get distracted really easily. Like I don't have ADHD, but I still get like if we're watching a movie, like all the lights have to be off, even if it's like just a little, like the red light or the blue light on like the DVR or something like that. Like I have to cover up all the lights, or else it's too distracting for me.
Interesting.
Or like at a concert, if someone like walks in front of me, like it's too like I can't stop my mind oftentimes from focusing on all the external stimuli.
Yeah.
So,
and then the question
being
comes
in the
from,
now.
The question comes from Jeffrey, and it's very open-ended. He says, what's DarkDryDrew's purpose in life?
Oh, wow. That's, let's see. I've kind of distilled it to a few things so far, but, well, for one, I'm 22 years old, so this is as far as I've gotten. But I would say the way, because I was really nihilistic, especially having had like chronic medical problems 10 years, and having it basically be unsolvable. It kind of, my friend, she's a scientist, and she told me about this study where they took rats and they shocked the rats, and some of the rats had a way to not get shocked, and some of them didn't.
Right.
And some of them would always go and find a way to avoid it, but the ones that couldn't, that would inevitably get shocked, they just were depressed and went into the corner and just like sat there waiting to die.
Right.
And so that was pretty validating, because that was like most of my experience from age 17 to even until maybe like June of 2018. And so getting over that, I was trying to find a way to get past nihilism, and it sort of gave me not entirely a life purpose, but sort of a better goal. And so I've kind of been thinking on this, that to me, the universe is like one giant living entity, kind of how like we have like gut flora inside of us that have such a profound effect on our bodies, even though we never see them. They're microscopic.
Right.
And so maybe we're like that for the universe. And because you could argue like, well, nothing you ever do is going to be important, because eventually you'll be dead. And that was sort of where I was at. So I'm like, how can I get past it? Like, how can I defeat these beliefs that are self-defeating? Because even though they're valid in many ways, they don't actually make your life better, though. And so you can still find another way that's a valid way of thinking, but that also makes your life better. And so I'm like, well, okay, there's future generations that I'll never meet. But seeing as where I'm at now, people in the past have determined so much of my life, so much of all of our lives. And so my goal essentially is to make the world better in whatever way I can contribute. So for me, that's through my comedy and my films and all my artwork. And then I'm looking at going and getting a master's in counseling and working with kids. Potentially, it's something I've been thinking about. So basically, just leaving the world a better place than when I entered it, even if that's, a marginal difference, even if my life contribution isn't much, but I'll do whatever I can. That's kind of my life goal.
Jeffrey also asked for a little clarification. He said, what happened in June 2018?
So after I graduated from college, my goal was to solve all my stomach problems. I've had severe IBS for about 10 years, and it had gotten worse and worse and worse. I was like suicidal freshman year of college, which would have been 2014, 2015, because I was sick every single day. Mm-hmm. And that kind of continued on until the next year. And it was something that I really didn't have the resources or time to fully figure out during college, because it was hard enough to just do the schoolwork and the internships and the jobs and stuff. And so after college, I'm like, okay, I can take, I had saved up enough money that I could take a year off. It's been about 7-8 months now, roughly. Mm-hmm. And so June was the point where I graduated, I'm ready for a new goal. And so the new goal was to solve my health stuff. So in June, I was, I think 175 pounds roughly. Mm-hmm. And I was eating carne asada fries, Little Caesars, Rock Stars, all that kind of stuff, the standard American hood rat diet. My sleep schedule, non-existent, basically ever since high school with all the AP classes that I had. I've sort of never been able to have a sleep schedule, and it sort of worked in a lot of ways, because I don't have bipolar, but I have sort of the mood disorders that they described, although I've gotten rid of a lot of those symptoms through dietary change, but sort of manic outbursts where I could, I'd be kind of dead the whole day, but then I'd have 3 hours where I cranked out I remember on one night I wrote 30 pages of jokes, and when you're talking about one-liner jokes, that's an ungodly amount, and so I'd have those outbursts where I wouldn't write anything for a month. Mm-hmm. And then I'd literally come up with 5 minutes of solid material in a 3-hour time period. So there's all that. And so there are all these different kind of aspects that played in. And then, so June finally of this, the first changes I made were huge dietary ones. Basically now I don't do gluten. I quit, I was drinking every night. I don't drink anymore.
Good for you.
No, yeah, and that was a good one. I smoke because it helps with the stomach problems, but not every day, because I saw what happens when I was doing it every day, and it's nope, this is not for me. So if I get really sick, I'll do it. But otherwise, I'm pretty, now, to think about my diet then of freaking fast food and all this other junk, and now I'm doing just water with lemon, and then I made my own kombucha and my own Voss, which are fermented beverages. I'm 135 pounds roughly, so I've lost
40 pounds,
50 pounds in total. After I was 175, but a year prior to that I was 185.
Yeah, so 50. Okay.
So 50 pounds in
Congratulations.
total, which I'm 5'6", so that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a ninja compared to then. I'm a lot. Although I'm at the point now where, if I forget to eat one meal because I'm on this, really kind of, sort of archaic diet in a lot of ways, really just, meat, some fruits, some vegetables, water with lemon, and, fermented beverages. If I forget to eat one meal, I'll lose, 3 pounds. Wow. So now it's just sort of getting on track. I think a workout routine. My mom's you should look into protein powder, but I prefer to keep everything as as natural and sustainable as possible.
Sure.
So basically, the difference from June to now is just I'm a different person. And I guess if you go on Bandcamp and you listen to the album, the Byproduct of Suffering by DarkDryDrew, you can hear it in my voice in certain parts in the album. The difference from then to now is it's outrageous.
That's fantastic.
Like, it's so weird to look back. It feels like a decade of difference.
Jeffrey says to say that's awesome, and Shelley says you sound like her son. So I guess her son's been going through kind of the same kind of thing you have. And I mean, that's just fabulous. That's amazing that you've been able to do that so well, especially when I remember when you and I first started talking just a few months ago, and your confidence level wasn't all that great at that point. I mean, you've just been making leaps and bounds. It's fantastic. It's just fabulous. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's been, I mean, it took being, and that's the thing, because I've met a lot more younger people with like stomach problems or autoimmune disease, stuff like that. It's more common now, and it's explainable for many different reasons, although we don't have to talk about that. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure your son's definitely gone through a lot of the same thing. I think a lot of people are going through this, and sort of the one advantage of like hardship is that it really speeds up the maturity process, which is good and bad. Because in a lot of ways, I mean, most of the people I connect with are like 50-year-olds plus, which is great. And they're like, man, I wish I was like you when I was your age. But then the problem is like it's harder to connect with people my own age that I very rarely meet someone my age where I'm like, wow, we're on the same page here, you know? So yeah, that's the new challenge, finding.
On one hand, but on the other hand, it makes total sense to us because there are many people who will say, well, if you're connecting over from that point of view, it makes sense. I wanted to ask you about something.
Yeah, exactly.
Mike McEwen, Anne-Marie's husband, Anne-Marie does the Sunday podcast with me. He filled in one time and we talked about mirror exercises, going back to that topic. And he's been doing them consistently ever since then and has been telling me numerous times how much progress he's made with it. One of the things that he's told me about, and I'm curious to know whether you've had a similar experience, he's found that by doing the mirror exercises so consistently every single day, it's bringing up a lot of stuff, what we might call old tapes, stuff that gets in the way, stuff that he had buried away and is now bobbing to the surface. And so he's finding himself being faced with handling that stuff, handling it, and then getting it out of the way so he can keep going. And so it's been a very therapeutic experience, but nevertheless, it has been a little bit bumpy because he's had to experience that. Have you run into that same kind of thing?
Are we talking like more emotional trauma or
usually, yeah,
like personality quirks that are negative?
It could also be actual, experiences that keep playing over and over again in your head, but all of it's going to have an emotional context to it. So yeah, emotional trauma, that's a good way of describing it.
I don't think that I've gotten that from, or I would say potentially that maybe the mirror exercises inspire sort of introspective thinking. But for me, I wouldn't attribute that to the mirror exercises for me. And for me with IBS, it's sort of like a life sentence to like the restroom. So, I mean, we're talking like 2 to 4 hours a day when it was bad of just being alone in the restroom. And then I've always been introspective, just even since I was a kid, like I just enjoy thinking. So for me, a lot of those thoughts have always been there. And like I've just kind of perpetually been addressing things. And then some of them definitely are like way more challenging, like just sort of issues that no one can handle. Like, death stuff, purpose kind of stuff, things like that, where it's like, there is no answer. There's nothing will satisfy you here. You have to create meaning that will put you in a state of peace so that you can continue doing things that are enjoyable. And
you may find that even that gets addressed over time. You may find yourself finding ways to address that over time, so don't rule that one out just yet. But I understand what you mean.
Yeah. Well, So in regards to mirror, I would imagine that mirror exercises could definitely promote that, especially because for most people they're probably so go, especially nowadays because there's so many things you can be doing and thinking about.
Right.
That like meditation or taking even just a couple, even 30 seconds to just stare in the mirror is
Mm-hmm.
such a long time to be alone for most people that it probably
Mm-hmm.
would make them start thinking about things.
Sure.
For me, that's sort of where the dark side of my own life, that's where I feel most comfortable. And that was something I learned recently, was that like in the dark abyss is like where I've spent so much of my life that being happy for me is sort of a foreign feeling that's like somewhat new and not always there. And I don't even think that happiness necessarily is a goal for me. It's more of like purpose, and then the
Mm-hmm.
happiness kind of comes from that. So
Hmm.
like when I'm writing the screenplays or when I'm helping other people, and it brings a sense of fulfillment, then the happiness kind of comes with that. But it's not like I'm seeking happiness, I guess.
That's good though. I mean, the idea of making it a purpose, I
Yeah.
like that a lot because that's taking control over it rather than expecting that it somehow comes upon you if you press the right buttons or something. That's a much better position, I would say. I like that. I like that you're doing that.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey has another
Thank you. Yeah.
question.
Yeah. That's big.
Oh yeah, sure. Jeffrey also wanted to follow up by asking what your he phrased it this way. What are his emotions about the future? I think what he means is um, how do you feel about your future at this point?
Ooh, gosh. Well, one of the things that actually you helped me with this one a lot was like figuring out what I really, really enjoy. And so
Mm,
I kind of learned over the past few months since I started doing the podcast, really was a big help. I love doing stand-up comedy when I write it, and then performing it's fun, but there's not much of an outlet for it. And so
mm,
lately I've been kind of reconsidering how I want to go about that, because
right.
like the majority of like this scene is people that just grind and grind away, and I've never enjoyed anything that involves grinding in any capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm not going to freaking go into like these little dingy places 5 days a week. So sort of in regards to that pursuit, sort of mixed feelings. Screenwriting, I absolutely love it. I've like fallen more in love with it. So that I'm super excited about. That's why I wanted to have my rooms organized, because if there's any sort of clutter or distractions, it's sort of like that sort of manifests in my mind in the
Mm-hmm.
same way.
Mm-hmm.
My mind's then cluttered and distracted. So trying to get that on track was a bit of a bear, but now that that's pretty much handled, I like have a clear mind. So that stuff I'm super excited about.
Very
And
good.
then sort of outside of that, the overall feelings, that'd be a tough one. Really good, and sort of still, I mean, there's still lots of like one of the things I finally learned, because I was in like I said, dark places a lot of my life, really. And then this past 6 months with like all these dietary changes was like very,
Mm,
very severe. Like just try cutting out one thing. And I'm sure a lot of you have already done this. But like, it's like, oh my gosh, you never realize how brutal it'll be to just cut out like caffeine. And then I was doing all of these things and then spending most of the time alone because my mom was at work. So I'd just be at home all day with my thoughts, and I wasn't feeling well. And so that's sort of the other thing is like with the IBS stuff, where it's not just me being alone with my thoughts in the restroom most of my life. It's also being sick and
mm-hmm.
in
Yep.
pain. And so then like the thoughts are kind of distorted. So a lot of
Right.
my life's been kind of like this, this dark. And that's sort of, even when I was a kid though, even before I had the medical problems, I was dark. Um, I, yeah, I drew darks. Like my friend was like, yeah, dude, even when you're like a 5-year-old, you're drawing like skeletons and guns and all that kind of stuff. And, uh, so
It's not
for
terribly
God,
surprising
yeah.
because these things do generate and develop pretty early in our lives. But yeah, thanks for reminding people that that is common and you fit in perfectly in that sense. Um, two more things.
Yeah.
Jeffrey wanted to kind of summarize it. He says he's helping people now by being open and honest about who he is. So that's a compliment to you.
Yeah.
You're sharing your story on the
Thank
podcast,
you.
and that is a good thing. That's not always an easy thing to do. So yeah, we got to give you some congratulations for that too. Well done. And then Shelley
Yeah,
wants to
I
know.
appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely. Shelley wants to know, what do you think about doing what you enjoy is choosing happiness? What do you think about doing what you enjoy is choosing happiness?
What do you mean by that?
I think she's asking, what do you think about the proposition that doing what you enjoy is choosing happiness?
Um, yeah, as far as I can tell, that's how it's been working for me lately. And what Walt told me 2 weeks ago was because I'm like so much in my head that I'm always trying to figure it out, and like you're saying, with to feel it out, and so
Mm-hmm.
that's been helping me with that. Where like let's say in your like I want to write the screenplay, right? But
Right.
I'm not always in the mood to write it, and
Yeah,
so
sure.
sometimes I just have to force myself to sit down because I know once I start I'll enjoy it, but I kind of have to get over that wall. But then
Mm-hmm.
there's also like the time where I really like it's like no, like I need to just like go sit down and play video games for 2 hours and go to bed. Like today was long, and so that's the difference. Is feeling it out and being like,
Mm.
okay, like if I were to get over this mental, because I always think of creativity as like this pipeline, and every single day it's going to get clogged. And it's like the first 10 minutes you have to like just clear that or whatever, and not even just for creativity. But like that's the main thing that my kind of focal point is. So I think it definitely is choosing happiness, but like just being aware of when you when you think versus when you feel.
Mm.
Like, are you just thinking you want to do it, or do you actually feel it in your heart that you want to do it? Because like lately, I have written hardly any jokes. Like I write maybe 1 to 3 jokes a week, and I was trying to figure it out because there was a time where I was writing like 1 to 3 jokes a day, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, what has changed? I was trying to figure that out because I'm like, is it just that I'm discouraged that there's no platform for me to perform, or is it that and sort of what I think that the answer is to some degree is that when I was in college, like freshman year and sophomore year, I had actually all 4 years I had people to share my jokes with that had
Yes.
that sense of humor. It was friends freshman year. It was my girlfriend sophomore, junior year, and then we broke up, and so senior year it was my friends. But now back home, like my parents, they support me, but they don't have the same sense of humor.
Mm.
Partly that it's like really dark, and they kind of it's hard to see your kid or your kids like what are you saying all these things for? And they understand it and they support me. But so for me, it was like figuring that out. Like, oh my gosh, like maybe part of why I'm less passionate about this lately is that I have no outlet for it. But
Sure.
then still in my heart, it's still something I want to do, but maybe
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not ready for it. So choosing happiness might be to kind of like delay it and focus on something else for me. So for me, I'm now focusing on the screenplay, which also has been on my mind for 2 years, but like I had to get my mind to a place where and this is my screenplays are sort of me processing my life, which is something I only realized in the past few months. It's the first one I wrote. I've only written 2 so far, but the first one I wrote, I remember I was reading it to my then girlfriend, and it kind of freaked her out a bit because a lot of it had like parallels to real life, even though it was like, it's still a fictional thing. And then I realized after I had broken up with her and all this other stuff that like the screenplay sort of predicted a lot of my life.
Mm.
Like it sort of was my brain was not caught up with my heart, and my heart was in the screenplay. And so
Okay.
then when my brain read the screenplay, it was like, oh my God, we'd known this for months. It's just that now we're caught up. And so I kind of had the same feeling where I'm like, okay, I'm going to get my life and my mind and my heart all kind of on the same page. And that's where I'm like finally at. And so I finally feel like ready to write this screenplay. And I think it's sort of going to be me processing these past several years. So choosing happiness there's a difference between thinking about it and feeling it.
Mm.
And so hopefully those examples kind of,
Sure.
and you can apply that to any, if you're working out, doing exercise, it still works the same way. Or if you're like working on your career, it's the same thing. Where it's like, well, do you think, does this, or like with values, because I have a bunch of friends that are straight from undergrad to grad school. They want to be doctors, and it's like, have you ever thought that you don't enjoy this? And they don't
Mm.
even think about it. They're so focused on the work that they never even realize that they don't actually enjoy it, and they're miserable
Mm.
all the time. So yeah,
Yeah.
all of
It's
sussing out those things, not easy.
It's pretty important, though, isn't it? That's what I think you're discovering
Yeah,
through all this. You've got to be connected to the heart, because if you're not, anything that you end up doing, even if you can push yourself to do it for years on end, starts to become hollow and meaningless and pointless. And you say, why did I
yeah,
spend all my time doing this thing that I don't really love all that much? Whereas
yeah, exactly.
when you're following the heart, every single thing that you do in alignment with that thing that you love so much just takes on more energy. And that's what's so cool about it. It just becomes a
Yeah,
self-fulfilling, self-growing, self-energizing process.
I agree totally.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a weird. It's one, and that's the, all this stuff can be kind of frustrating at times because
Oh, sure.
like some cliche piece of advice will just all of a sudden make sense where it's like, oh, the thing you've been looking for all along was inside you the whole time. And you're like, oh my God, that's literally every piece of advice that's been around for more than 100 years. It has all been true, but you have to like experience it before it makes sense. But now I know, like, if there's a piece of advice that's lasted more than 100 years, like, it's true. I just have to figure out how to experience it now.
So you figure it stood the test of time.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly.
Yeah. Shelly wanted to share something with you. She says, I have digestive issues too, and aloe vera, drinking aloe vera is amazing for healing. So I don't know if you've ever messed with that, but she wanted to let you know that.
I'll have to look, I have not heard of that before. Aloe vera. Okay, I'll
Mm.
need to look into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause for me lately it's been the thing I started with using bone broth, which you gotta. Well, also it's worth checking like where the was it grass fed or corn fed. There's like so many different. That's what's
Sure.
hard about stomach stuff. Is like there are so many things that can affect it. Like your sleep schedule affects it. The things you breathe in the air. Like are you exposed to lots of chemicals every day? Like there's so many things. Yeah, at least if you found the aloe vera works, that's dope. I'm gonna have to try that.
Yeah,
For me,
she's had a lot of experience apparently with that
lemon.
and a lot of success, so that's definitely
Yeah,
worth trying. Yeah. One thing that I've
yeah, I'll
noted,
write that down.
yeah, sure. One thing that I've noted about the following your heart when you're trying to deal with things like what you just described, trying to sort out foods. You know, which food do I need to go with? You know, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I look for this? When you when you uh, when you start looking at food from a point of view of feeling happier and of feeling more loving toward yourself and more confident and all the stuff that goes with that, all the stuff that comes out of the mirror exercises primarily. When you start looking at
Yeah,
stuff that way, I think you may not have seen it yet, but I think what you're going to start seeing is answers coming to you rather than you going to find the answers. So, for instance, when it comes to, should I go with this particular version of the food or that particular version, that will just be presented to you in a way that is most appropriate for where you are at that moment in time. The more that you're in that happy zone, it's just going to, like you were talking about at the beginning of the show, you talked about things falling in place. That's going to be the kind of thing that falls in place. And it's going to happen in times and in ways that kind of catch you off guard. But if you have like a little
yeah.
back end awareness, like the back of your head, you're kind of paying attention. Are there little serendipities and synchronicities like that happening? You'll start to notice them more. And when the more that you start to notice that, I think what you'll find is you'll start changing your story. Like your story is still how you're dealing with stomach issues. I think eventually you're going to find yourself turning that into stomach health issues, not stomach issues, but stomach health, so, improvement in stomach, improvement in digestion. You're going to change the way you think and talk about it just because you stayed in that happy frame of mind as much as you possibly could. You're going to see a lot of stuff like that happening.
That's very interesting, and that's funny you mention that 'cause I am finally getting to that point, and I'm trying not to become the like annoying person that tells everyone about their wonderful diet that saved their life.
Right?
So that's what happened at first. Was like, oh my God, like all of these changes finally made sense, and my friends like did not care about it at all. And I'm like, oh, like I need to not mention it. But yeah, that's how I'm looking at it. It's like the you gotta align literally. Like if you really want to solve your problems, there's no single trick. Like it's all of every single thing you can do to make. Like for me, I got one of those hand grippers, and I have it in my car, so I'm strengthening my grip while I'm at at a stop.
Right?
Things like that. Like every subtle little thing, it all adds up. Sort of like so in video games, you can get little boosts. And I remember in a few games, the boost would be like plus 1%. And I'm like, where would 1% ever actually help you in anything? 1% health or attack. That's so dumb. Like, that's not going to help. But then it made sense to me lately where it's like, oh, well, if you get a plus 1% here and there and there and there, like your entire being as a whole becomes better. You might not, you know, like I'm 5'6". I'm never going to become a basketball player or something. But at the same time, like I can become, you know, a bit more agile, or I can stretch more and kind of be a bit more, you know, this and that. And so, yeah, definitely every single little boost.
Well, you're stretching yourself in many ways. I mean, you're not just stretching yourself physically, which is good. You're also stretching yourself emotionally and mentally, and in terms of your passion for life. All that's stretching out. That's when you really live. By the way, I didn't want to overlook what Nasha said. Nasha was piling on with what Jeffrey said. She says it's very brave of him to come on the podcast and be so vocal, and this shows how open he is to change. Awesome. So you have another fan there.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That was that's something when I was younger, it wasn't really appreciated, being open, and that was always really hard for me. So I've always been, I guess you could even say, honest to a fault, because when I was young, like I had no filter. Like I would just say what I thought, and that would just upset lots of people, especially because I always kind of had like controversial beliefs on a lot of things. I just look at things differently. And so I'm finally getting to a point where I realized that, especially now, because I've been helping students at the school my mom works at and some other stuff, and like seeing that when I open up, or even on the podcast, when I open up, it helps other people, because there's this huge kind of societal pressure that, like, you know, tries to get you to be a certain way. And so getting over that was hard, especially for me being like a weird introverted kid most of my life. But stand-up comedy did help a lot. I should give credit to that.
Absolutely, I'm sure.
When I did dark humor in Davis for 4 years, like it's either gonna destroy you or make you really tough. And
right.
So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Jeffrey also mentioned that, and this ties into what you were just talking about. He says it's like we work towards our blocks, and then they break open when they're ready and in their own way. That's what you're experiencing. That's what you're describing, right?
Exactly.
That's the beauty of being in that happy zone. Then when you're in the happy zone, stuff just falls apart. The stuff that needs to fall apart, not the stuff that you don't want to fall apart, but the stuff that's been getting in the way just kind of dissolves. It takes very little effort to get rid of it. Whereas when we're in that really bad place, when we're depressed or angry or fearful or frustrated or whatever, those blocks become monumentally huge boulders that just don't ever move.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very, very big difference.
And I think for me, I wouldn't even describe it necessarily as my happy place, but more as a place where I have the potential for happiness.
Sure,
so
yeah, that's
more
fine.
Of a place of being content. I wouldn't want to give the idea that I'm happy all the time, or even most of the time, but more that I'm content, and like that I feel like I'm on the right path. Like that I feel that the direction I'm going is the right direction for me, and that it's the direction that I can have the most positive impact on my life and the lives of others. And so then, like, happiness for me kind of comes out of that, where I'm like, you know, when I was a kid, I didn't even like to do dishes or things like that. But now I'm like, around the house stuff, I'll like go out of my way to help my parents with weird tasks or whatever, just because like I want to make things better. And so for me, that was like the small step that it took to kind of, or like my sister went on a trip and I like gave her money for the trip. They used to be like really frugal and stingy. And so like just trying to do all those kind of things, like that has kind of helped get to the place where happiness can exist.
I think you make a good point. I mean, I kind of use the word generically, but I could probably consider using different words. I mean, on the Abraham Hicks scale, it isn't even at the top. It's number 3. At the top, you have words like appreciation, which I think is perhaps a better word anyway. What we're going for is appreciating everything. When you appreciate everything, everything gets better. So I don't know what word you'd want to use yourself, but I have to agree with you. I probably should use a different word besides happy.
I At least for me, from my experience, it's just that with like I always try and you could tell I'm pretty verbose and overly specific on things, but mostly just because I don't want to give an answer that might mislead potentially. And I'm not saying like that's what you're doing. It's more of, I guess it's more of just explaining what you mean by like when I explained optimistic nihilism to you, because like nihilism has a whole bunch of different meanings, and so that was something that I didn't realize, was that I have to like clarify specifically what I mean when I say this. Because some people go, oh, nihilism's a rejection of everything, or it's just that everything's meaningless, or it's that you hate everyone. And I'm like, whoa, like, let me clarify. Like, for me, it's just this perpetual feeling of hopelessness and despair and kind of like, oh, things are bad. But then the optimistic side is this. But yeah, the same thing. I guess just like you said, clarifying, like, it's a place of appreciation. I really like that. Appreciation, definitely.
Yeah, appreciation's a very powerful
and that comes
thing.
with all these, meditation and the mirror exercises and all of that. Like, it's definitely, I think, appreciation.
I agree with you.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Shelley said that I describe it as clicking. Things just click together and you are on a great high in life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's, that. And then I guess for me is that it doesn't always click necessarily like like some things will click all at once. Like, in fact, both the two big screenplays I've done, the first one and the one I'm on now, like, 'cause I thought about them for like 2 years and then it all clicked. Like most of the screenplay wrote itself in a single moment.
That's nice.
And then similarly, all of my health stuff's been in that way too lately, where it was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize that literally no one actually has any idea anything about stomach problems. Like, this is my own journey. And so, yeah, the way it clicks, I think clicking is definitely, there's probably just a bunch of different ways you could describe all this. Throw as many of them out and you know, whatever kind of works for your life is like, yeah, whatever gives meaning to you, I suppose.
Oh, by the way, Jeffrey, alluding to what you talked about earlier, how you want to be helpful to others of your own age in similar situations. He says, you're a natural counselor. So that's a pretty high praise.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's my mom's a counselor, so I never really realized it until like a couple of years ago that like my entire life existence was like training to become a counselor, just because like being a counselor. So I've kind of been coming to terms with that I'm like, oh, maybe I should like help people.
Well, he's followed up by saying,
wow, actually that's,
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, he followed up by saying, he, meaning you, is helping me right now, helping heal my younger self.
Oh, I appreciate hearing that. That's sort of how I think I look at a lot of what I say in that same kind of capacity, where I'm like when I try and help younger people or just anyone really, it's sort of like, how could I have made young Drew's life like less miserable? You know, not even necessarily better, but like less miserable. Like, that's the first start, is like less miserable. And then once you get past that, it's like, okay, how can we make it better now?
Well, less miserable is better. Yeah. Anything that moves off of miserable has got to be better. Even if you're still in the negative zone, it's still better.
That's true.
You know?
That's true. That's a good point. I guess it's all framing.
It's framing, and it's relative to where you are. I mean, you could be in deep, deep, deep depression, and if you get up to anger, that's improvement. That's better.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I like that.
That's right out of Abraham Hicks. I mean, Abraham has that 22-point scale. They take 22 points and assign emotional names, labels to each point on the scale, and they say, no matter where you are on the scale, if you want to get into a better place, just go like 1 or 2 steps above that. Look what's up 1 or 2 steps up on the scale. So if you're at angry, you'll look up, see what's up there. Maybe it's going to be frustration, or maybe it's going to be boredom or something like that. But just look for what you can get at that's kind of within reach, instead of going all the way up the scale. Well, that's what being better is all about.
Yeah.
It's just going for a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better.
Yeah, that's it. That's a good. I think I don't remember if I mentioned it was you before, or if it's someone else. But I've designed my own scale, at least it fits for me, of where like
really
from like yeah, the 10 is like this euphoric bliss,
Mm-hmm.
and 5 sort of like kind of a neutral feeling, and 4 is like depressed.
Right?
3 is, a higher version of depressed. But at the bottom, when you're at, I guess, like, I think if you start the scale at 1, I was trying to describe this to someone. Because 1 was the bleak feeling of nothingness.
Mm.
And it doesn't make any sense unless you've been there before. Because I was trying to explain it to this person, and they just did not get it at all. And I'm like, because they're like, what do you even mean by that? And I'm like, well, it's this, when you get, like, let's say 2 is like crushing despair,
Mm-hmm.
which is sort of like beyond depression. It's sort of this like a corset that's like crushing you from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Or like all the walls are crushing you. Like it's like gravity has been heightened and it's coming from all directions, that kind of feeling. But then that bleak feeling of nothingness is the worst one because you don't feel anything. You just feel hollow. There's nothing. And that is the worst one.
I would suggest that 1 is the equivalent of that mouse that can't avoid the shocks and crawls off into the corner.
Yeah. That mouse is like, that mouse would be number 2, which is the,
Oh, you don't think the mouse is at number 1 yet?
No, when the mouse crawls, the mouse wouldn't even crawl to the corner. The mouse would just be sitting on the edge of the bed, just feeling nothing. You don't even, and that's the worst one because you don't even feel like a person. You just kind of feel like this husk because at least with emotion, even if it's like crushing despair all the way up to euphoric bliss, you at least know that you're still a person and that you're alive. But when you're at 1 and you just feel nothing, that, to me, it was the worst one. And I wasn't there too often in that place, but on a couple occasions. And that was, especially around the time of my breakup, it was this feeling of like being dead, of like not existing. That one, I should probably think about all this more before we talk about it. We could talk about all this stuff, create a multifaceted, like, scale of, I don't even know what you'd call it, of moods. Because all the other stuff, like frustration and anger, I don't factor that into this one because this one's more of just, like, moods from, you could call it happy to sad, but then, but it's like when you're explaining it to a kid, like, you can't really explain depression to children, because most children don't really experience it in exactly the same way until you kind of you get to a point of like, I have to be older to sort of for your mind to kind of comprehend things differently before it really becomes depression. Although I couldn't say that for sure. I haven't met enough like depressed kids. And maybe I probably is at age like 6 or 7 that you could really experience it. But yeah, that bleak feeling of nothingness. I don't know how many people reach that one, but that one's just, it's a very there's no words to truly describe how it feels besides nothingness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's disconnection from, or what they often call disconnection, turning off the connection, ignoring the connection that you have to feeling because it's too painful. Everything that's been coming through has been too painful. You got to turn it off. You got to numb it in some way. You got to mute it. Just turn the whole thing off. And then once you get there, it's like,
yeah, that sounds right. That's probably what it is, at least scientifically, yeah. And then getting out of there that's the weird thing. Is like I don't remember how I got out of that.
One step at a time. That's how you got out.
I guess.
You made a decision, and then one step at a time. It didn't happen overnight, but you just took whatever steps you could take, and as you took more steps, more ideas came to you about more steps to take, and it just became a snowball, a momentum builder. That's what you went through. You developed the momentum of appreciation, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, gosh, I haven't, because for me that was that's the weird thing. It's like it's a dark place. I kind of have this like vague recollection of it, but I don't remember the specifics, I just remember like sort of visual images in my mind of what the rough idea was.
Well, Unfortunately, we've run out of our hour, but that was really great. Thank you for sharing all that. I mean, just the fact that you've made so much progress, that alone is fabulous. And then the fact that you've been able to express it so clearly and with such great examples without any prior planning, that speaks highly of you. So, thank you for doing that because that's really great.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I always enjoy every podcast. There's always something new, and I learn more about me or you, or hopefully helping someone, and that's kind of
well, we're going to learn even more next week.
Show up.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that's why I show up too. And we're going to learn even more next week because two is going to become three. So when Steve joins us, Steve is like a ball of energy. So I mean, it's going to lend a really interesting dynamic to our discussion. So I'm looking forward to it. But have a great week. I hope you continue to do the mirror exercises and do your other processes. And I can't wait to find out what you're going to be telling us next week.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Yeah, I am too. Yep. We'll see you all next time. You're on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
See ya.